Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. So Blizzard has just dropped a whole lot of news for us on patch 11.1. Tons of information, and we're going to be talking about all the mage changes in kind of a separate video, but I want to talk about specifically Evoker today. So lots of stuff is changing here. Probably the biggest thing, and I've seen a lot of people talk about this and say like, oh, Aug is dead, Aug is dead. It's this Augmentation Evoker can no longer buff the tanks and healers in patch 11.1. So I'm just going to briefly talk about this before we get into the Devastation stuff. I don't want to spend too much time on this because a lot of it is speculation, but I will say that Augmentation not buffing the tank and the healer is a long overdue change. This is a change that basically will make Augmentation Evoker no longer mandatory. However, a lot of people are saying this makes Augmentation dead. That is just not true. This will likely be a damage increase for Augmentation. This paired with the new tier bonus, which we'll cover later, is probably going to be like a pretty significant gain. And Augmentation already does a ton of damage. And even if it isn't buffing the healer in the tank, it still has a crap ton of utility that no other DPS can really do. Its kit is absolutely insane. So as long as the damage tuning is anywhere remotely close to where it is now, if we have the new set bonus and this change, this is actually looking like more of an Augmentation buff than a nerf. So if you're hoping for Augmentation to be dead, bad news. This is probably not going to happen. In fact, Augmentation will probably be stronger than it is now. It's just it won't be mandatory anymore. That's the biggest change. So yeah, it doesn't buff the tank anymore, but it does have increased effectiveness. So they're adding back in closest clutch mates. If you were to potentially do like a 4 DPS key, you probably do like a crazy amount of damage, although I'm not sure how you'd survive without a healer. But let's just say your tank is able to survive on their own and you can rock 4 DPS in there. 3 DPS plus an AUG, you're probably going to blast the key. I don't think that's really realistic for the higher keys, but I could see it happening in like 10s or 12s, something like that. But yeah, the biggest loser, I guess, in this is actually the healer. The tank buff when it comes to Augmentation, aside from like their own self-healing, is kind of just a psychological effect. It's just like a placebo. I think tanks feel like they're getting a lot out of Augmentation, but that really hasn't been the case for a while. But since tanks are often the people who kind of determine like who gets in the group, or healers, right? Those two roles are usually, they have a little bit more power in choosing like the comp. Those two are not getting the Augmentation benefits as much, right? They're still getting the benefits. Like the healer is still getting the source of magic, which Devastation, by the way, can also bring, just throwing it out there. And then the tanks are still getting Blistering Scales, which is exclusive to Augmentation. So there's still a benefit there. And then Augmentation is still giving people Shifting Sands with their versatility buff. They still have the Wormstone tech, so they can bring a lot of utility with that. They still are extremely tanky. They've got Zephyr. They've got a Cheat Death. They still got the Absorb Shields from their Breath of Aeons. They're probably doing even more damage than they are now, and they're already a very, very high damage class if they're played in a good group, and also they know what they're doing. So yeah, I think this just kind of like levels the playing ground when it comes to what is fair in the comp. So Augmentation is no longer required, but it's still probably so good that you want to bring it unless the damage tuning is really, really bad. If the Augmentation damage tuning is bad, then it will probably not be as mandatory. But if any of the other classes are really, really well tuned, Augmentation's back on the menu because it does benefit from bad class tuning. Like the more the tuning is out of whack for other classes, the better Augmentation gets. So yeah, I don't think that this is killing Aug. That's all I'm going to say on it for now. Kess actually has a really great video. I'm going to link it in the description if you want to watch his take on it, because he plays a lot of Augmentation and high keys, is an expert on that stuff. So definitely go check out his analysis on Augmentation if you want more than what I'm covering. But that's going to be it for Augmentation. They've also buffed threat for tanks. So this is something that's long overdue. Tanks have been losing threat way too easily. Even tanks who are good at pressing their buttons lose threat like crazy. And they're just doing a blanket 22% buff to threat. So this is a very, very welcome change. Honestly, way overdue, but you know, just in time for Christmas, so we'll take it. Benefits everyone, hurts no one. We love it. Okay, and now we have the Evoker changes. Okay, so lots of stuff in here. A lot of this is like a false positive, so I just want to go quickly through the stuff that isn't actually a buff. So at the very top here, you see that all these aura buffs are coming in. These are them just fixing the auras to match what they are on live. So this isn't like an additional Devastation buff. This is just like matching the PTR client to what live is. Okay, so these have already happened. So we can skip past these buffs. Also, the buffs to like Pyre and stuff like that, this is already live as well. So like if you look, the coefficient on Pyre, it says old coefficient 173. If we look at the current coefficient on Pyre, you'll see it's 209. Over here it's 209. It's the same. There's no buff here. They're just fixing the PTR, because PTR, live, all these different like pathways WoW takes whenever they're in development They all are on like different versions of the game, and their version control isn't always the best. So like sometimes if they make a change, they have to like go back and add other changes to bring it up to where it is now, because those changes, those hotfixes may not have been added to the PTR in the first place. So anyways, ignore the huge damage buffs. Those are already in the game, but I mean, they're still good, right? Still good. Probably the biggest thing that's changing for Devastation is this new talent. So his talent says Disintegrate takes 1 additional time but deals 10% less damage. A lot of people have been asking me how this talent works, and I think I have a pretty good idea of it. So if we actually go to the tooltip, right, we know that Disintegrate has 4 ticks, right? Disintegrate ticks 4 times right now. If you click this talent, it's going to add a 5th tick. So people are like, okay, well, is this going to make the cast time longer? Well, this word right here actually means speed, right? So it's actually speeding up. And if you look at the spell, it says there's an effect aura that increases, it modifies the time between ticks, okay? See, it says negative 20 milliseconds. So just for, you know, sanity check here, because this should be making it faster, it should tick more often, should increase the frequency of the ticks. Let's look at another talent that we understand how it works, and that way we can draw a conclusion on what this is actually doing. So if we go over to the Devastation talents, and we actually have a talent that does this exact same thing, right? Natural Convergence. Disintegrate channels 20% faster. If we click on this talent, and then we cross-compare the tooltip here, you'll notice that this actually says the same thing. Apply Aura, modifies buff duration, modifies time between ticks. This is the one that we were looking at earlier. -20, -20. What this is doing is it's just making it so that Disintegrate ticks 20% faster. Okay, because it has 4 ticks. If it ticks 20% faster, guess what? That's a 5th tick, right? That's all that's happening here. They aren't increasing the amount of time you're going to spend channeling Disintegrate, as far as I can tell, on the spell data and also on the tooltip. All they're doing is they're adding an additional tick, so that's a 20% increase to Disintegrate, but then they're taking away 10% of that, okay? So it's a 10% increase, but there are other interactions here that we should also note. So what else interacts with Disintegrate ticks? Because Disintegrate ticks are pretty good, right? Let's talk about that. So number 1 is causality. Causality makes it so that every time Disintegrate ticks, we get cooldown reduction on our Empower spells. What this essentially means is that we're just getting an extra 0.5 seconds every single time we channel Disintegrate if we let it tick out 5 times. If it's a mass Disintegrate, every Disintegrate is getting that extra tick, right? So you could think of this as a pretty significant buff to mass Disintegrate, because mass Disintegrate is always tied to the value of how many Empowers you get, right? If I am getting the same amount of Empowers, which I won't, I'll actually get slightly more. But let's say I'm getting the same amount of Empowers. Every single one of those mass Disintegrates that follows an Empower is getting basically another tick of damage there. So it's getting 10% more on top, right? Because it's 20% increase minus the 10%. It's just 10% better mass Disintegrate. So in a way, this is making mass Disintegrate even better than it is now. It is also providing more chances to proc Scintillation. So Scintillation is a 15% chance per tick to launch an Eternity Surge, right? So if we're getting an extra tick every Disintegrate, that just means we're getting more Scintillation procs. They are also changing Eternity Surge, and this is a huge change, okay? So right now, Eternity Surge is going to hit anything within 12 yards of the target, but they're actually changing this to 25 yards, okay? So that's pretty crazy. Now, it says when empowered here, but this is actually, I don't think this is actually true, because you don't have to empower Eternity Surge to cast it. You can also cast Eternity Surge by proccing it, right? So if I get a Scintillation proc, and I have Eternity Span, that means that potentially there's an enemy within 25 yards that's also going to get a Eternity Surge on it. It used to be 12 yards, but now it's going to be 25 yards because of this talent interaction and the Eternity Surge range increase. So this is huge, right? We're getting more procs on Scintillation. We're getting procs to go further with Eternity Span. We're also getting more cooldown reduction, like we mentioned, right? Since we're getting a causality buff here, we're getting extra ticks, so we're getting Empowers more often as well. Now, of course, this is kind of tied to our Essence generation as well and our Essence Burst. We will be losing our tier bonus in 11.1. We have to keep that in mind. But the new tier bonus is looking really, really good. So here we have the new tier bonus for Devastation. These are all basically the same idea. They're all just like Gamba, but they are guaranteed with your cooldown. So Devastation says, your damage spells have a chance to hit a jackpot. Launching Shatter and start at 3 nearby enemies at 50% effectiveness. Casting Dragon Rage always hits jackpot. So right away, we have an insane synergy with one of our talents, because this thing will likely work with Arcane Vigor. I don't know for sure. We won't know until we're able to play on the PTR. But if it does work with Arcane Vigor, what that means is that Dragon Rage will instantly give you 2 Essence Bursts, as long as there are targets that you can hit with it, right? So that's just nice Essence generation, just like on its own. And then also we have it randomly proccing too. So if it randomly procs, does it also give you an Essence Burst? I don't know. We'll have to find out. But one thing we know for sure is that Shattering Star will be the primary driver of Essence Burst for Devastation now, because we are getting the tier bonus that we currently have that's going away. So we aren't going to get Essence Burst from our Eternity Surges, right? But we're also getting additional Shattering Stars. So if this interaction works, this could give us a lot of Essence Burst still. But we will definitely be getting most of our Essence Burst from our Shattering Star. So here on the 4-piece, it says casting Shattering Star or hitting a jackpot increases the damage of your next Empower spell by 20%, increasing, this can stack up to 2 times. So it's just more Empower damage. So yeah, this tier bonus looks pretty good. I don't know if it could beat the current tier bonus. I would have to see like the sim numbers to know for sure, but I do know that giving us these free Shattering Stars, if they do interact with Arcane Vigor, is going to be a really, really nice Essence Burst driver. And the fact that we can just randomly get this, right? It can just randomly launch Shattering Stars whenever we're just dealing damage. That could mean that we're getting a lot more Essence Bursts. Now let's talk about what we're losing to get this new talent, right? The talent that was in its place was a refund talent. So you just had like a chance to not consume Essence Burst, but still count as consuming it for all intents and purposes. So that talent's gone. So that should mean less Essence Burst generation. But again, if the Shattering Stars that we're randomly proccing are also giving us Arcane Vigor, it could be net neutral. We'll have to see what the proc chance is. But overall, this is a very, very good change. I think this is a pretty significant Devastation Evoker buff. Also, the fact that Augmentation is no longer hard required. It's just really, really good kit. Scale Commander Devastation shares a lot of the same things in its kit that Augmentation has that makes it really good. It just obviously doesn't have the Shifting Sands. It doesn't have the Absorb Shield on your Breath of Aeons. It doesn't have Blistering Scales. But it does bring the other stuff. So, I mean, like, Devastation has not been meta in keys at all. But the damage is actually pretty good. And this is just going to be even more damage. And now that the playing field is being a bit leveled, it could be a situation where maybe you actually play Devastation sometimes. I don't think so. I think you'd still probably play Aug because they'll probably do more damage and also just has more utility still. But let's just imagine a world where they actually tune the damage and make these things equal. I think Devastation does need to have more damage than Augmentation for it to be brought to keys, because it just is harder to survive on and it has less utility. And yeah, so again, I don't think in the Aug versus Dev argument, when it comes to Mythic Plus, I don't think Dev is necessarily getting like a huge benefit here. I think Augmentation is still probably going to be the go-to. But, you know, you can always hope for the best. Maybe Devastation has a comeback. Anyways, so yeah, causality buffs through this. We also get scintillation buffs through this. Another thing too is that this actually increases the value of blue iridescence as well. So like if I spin my blue iridescence on a Disintegrate, I'm just getting 10% more value compared to now. So that's a pretty substantial increase. And also Charge Blast too. So Charge Blast is just giving us increased damage on Pyre for every blue tick of damage that we do. And with Azure, we are getting 1 extra tick in single target, up to 3 extra ticks in AoE. Plus, we're getting additional scintillation procs. So yeah, this is definitely really, really strong. It's going to be increasing our damage quite a bit. Moving on from there, we have some other things. So they are making improvements to Flame Shaper. So the first one is that Fan the Flames has basically been removed here. So it used to be there was a choice node on this talent. Now you just have the one choice, but this was the one that you went anyways all the time. They've also changed it. So now instead of Enkindle, you also have the option to go Expanded Lungs here. So this is basically a 20% faster Fire Breath that also could deal 30% more damage. They've also changed a couple other things as well. So we also have a Scorching Embers change. Now it can actually scale up to 40%, just like Augmentation with your Fire Breath. So Fire Breath max leveled up is going to cause your enemies to take increased damage from your pyres. So this could be like a lot more AoE. And then Firestorm. So Firestorm has basically been cut in half. It was 12 seconds, and then it was 10 seconds, and now it's going to be 6 seconds. It still does the same damage. So the rate at which it ticks is just going to be much, much faster. It's going to deal the damage much more upfront. This is really good because it means the tank doesn't need to stand still in the Firestorm to get the effective damage out of it. They're basically moving it away from having to be like a standstill, keep your mobs glued to the ground kind of situation. But there are unintended consequences of this. So probably the biggest one is that if you were to ever, let's say, play Feed the Flames, you're going to get less value out of this talent because your Firestorms are going to be out less. But you also are randomly proccing Firestorm, so maybe it doesn't matter. But overall, I think this is probably a positive change. It's just that Firestorm, the current design of it, I just don't like it. And I think a lot of players agree, like, we just don't really feel like it fits into the kit. It's really hard to make use of this talent. I don't really see a world where Scale Commander can even play Firestorm, like, ever. Because if you're going this talent build, what do you remove to try and get down the Firestorm? And you want the Firestorm talents if you pick it up, right? So you'd have to be giving up a lot to go down this route on the left. And you're not going to be dropping your Shattering Star stuff. Like, there's just no way. With the increase that they're doing, with the new talent here, with Disintegrate adding an additional tick, I just don't see a world where you can fit this thing in. We need Shattering Star to generate our Essence Burst. We don't get the Essence Burst refunds anymore. We're getting more value out of our Disintegrates. We're not dropping the Deep Breath talents. So I just don't see a world where Scale Commander could ever really play Firestorm, period. It's just too costly to even go down the side of the tree. And the fact that you have to route through this talent right here basically forces us to only play this Flame Shaper. But even as Flame Shaper, I just don't really see a situation. I guess maybe in Mythic Plus, you can maybe try and swing it. But like overall, yeah, I don't think Firestorm is going to be a thing. I think they need to keep working on that to maybe bring it up. But there is potential there for sure. Like, it is more damage. If you're playing Flame Shaper, Firestorm is definitely on the menu. But otherwise, I don't think it's really worth looking into. All right, so moving on, we have some augmentation buffs too. So they're obviously, we already talked about the Ebon Might change, and then they're adding Closest Clutch Mates back in, but they're also buffing the heck out of moats. So moats is what you play anyways if you're playing Scale Commander. You're just going to get more moats now, which is pretty good. Also, we have a new talent with Rockfall, which makes upheaval faster, and it also has a chance to give us Essence Burst. And then let's talk about the tier bonus again. So on the tier bonus side of things, we talked about Devastation, but let's talk about Augmentation. So Augmentation tier bonus looks really, really strong. In fact, if you kind of like look through all of these that they've data mined for 11.1, it seems like they kind of favor classes that have cooldowns up more often than not, because of the guaranteed jackpots. So like for Augmentation, for instance, right? Whenever you use your Breath of Aeons, you always hit jackpot. So lower cooldown on Breath of Aeons just like obviously gives us more value here. It's kind of similar to like Fire Mage, for instance. So like if you look at the Mage ones, right? You hit the jackpot, you get either clear casting, reduced cooldown of combustion, you get a Frostbolt volley. The more you can press your DPS button, the better this bonus is going to be. So for Fire Mage specifically, right? Casting combustion always gives you a jackpot, and you're going to basically get reduced cooldown on combustion, and you're also getting increased damage. Yeah, the more you press your button, the better this is all going to be for you. And Augmentation has this really nice benefit because you're able to farm back those Breath of Aeons a lot. But yeah, so what it actually does is it just causes another upheaval. It's unclear if this is going to have the same interactions as a normal upheaval, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that it will. So you'll likely get the shifting sands from it. You'll likely also get the uptime increase to Ebon Might from this as well. And then also our 4-piece upheavals have a 100% chance to grant Essence Burst. Eruptions cast with Essence Burst deal 25% increased damage. There's a lot that they're adding to Augmentation that interacts with Essence Burst. There's like a lot more generation of Essence Burst, it seems, just across the board. And this is just more damage. More damage on top of more damage. This set bonus is looking absolutely fantastic for Augmentation. And then in addition to that, we also have some other Flame Shaper buffs. So it looks like they're just trying to increase the potency of Flame Shaper across the board, kind of leaning into what works well for it. There's some pretty crazy stuff here. So they have made it so it consumes less of your breath, but it also does more. Like it's just basically doubling the amount, but also halving the amount. So like essentially this should be net neutral, but it does take away less of your fire breath, which is nice. Also, they're making it so that Engulf is a faster cooldown. They're just buffing all the talents across the board. I hope that they don't buff Flame Shaper too much because I really, really enjoy Scale Commander, but options are never bad. It's fine to have options. Also, this one's interesting. So it says, apply aura charge recovery affected by haste regen. So this is for your essence, I believe. It seems like they're trying to make it so the essence is affected by haste. So haste should be a better stat than it is currently. And probably the biggest change overall, and we already saw this happen before, but they took it away from us. They're making it so that Rescue now breaks roots. And that is probably, honestly, in Raid, that's probably the biggest augmentation buff across the board here. I don't know if you've ever tried to do Mythic Queen Anserac as augmentation, but like the biggest thing holding you back on that fight is the fact that you can't break your own root. But with Rescue, you could break your root and have a root break for every set. So yeah. So yeah, overall, I think Evoker is winning big time here. I mean, like crazy, crazy buffs across the board. Devastation is getting more interesting. It's getting back some of the niche cases that make it like really, really strong, and its damage is already good. So it's just getting better. Augmentation is leaning more into the personal damage and the damage dealer side of things, which is great. That makes me excited because that's what I don't like about Augmentation is the support aspects of it, but they're just leaning more into you just do more damage. It's less about the utility. You still have crazy utility, but you're just dealing way more damage, and it's more of a proper DPS spec. So yeah, I'd say overall, this looks like a huge Evoker win just across the board, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. So yeah, leave a comment if you have some insights maybe that I missed here. But overall, the future looks pretty bright for Evoker, honestly. This is looking really, really exciting. I definitely can't wait to log into the PTR and find out what this actually all does. But yeah, very excited for Evoker in patch 11.1. Hopefully you are too. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.